Would you give away your last chance at hope to a stranger? When Becky, a single mom working night shifts, handed her scratch-off ticket to a broke veteran, she never imagined the chain of kindness it would spark, or how it would turn a quiet roadside store into a legend among truckers across the country. The neon open 24 hours sign outside Marlene's stop and go flickered weakly against the dark stretch of Route 40, its buzzing light the only pulse in the otherwise deserted night. Inside, Becky Reynolds, 28, wiped down the coffee station for the third time, her hands raw from cheap sanitizer. She was a single mother who had long ago traded dreams for survival, stuck working the graveyard shift to keep a roof over her and her son Danny's heads. The hum of the soda machine and the radio playing 80s classics were her only company until the doorbell rang a little after 2 a.m. Samuel Pearson stepped inside, the door's squeak echoing louder than it should in the quiet store. The old man wore a heavy green army jacket, frayed at the sleeves, decorated with patches so faded they looked like ghosts of a younger man's service. His boots were scuffed to the sole, his posture bent yet somehow proud. Becky watched him shuffle slowly toward the coffee pots. His eyes were clear but carried a weariness deeper than any night shift. She'd seen men like him before, Vietnam vets who never truly left the jungle, desert storm soldiers still fighting battles long after the guns went quiet. He fumbled coins from his pocket, tarnished dimes and nickels that rang sharp as they hit the counter. Becky caught herself staring. She wasn't the only one desperate tonight, and something about the way Samuel counted those coins, the careful way he lined them up, broke something inside her. She thought of Danny's growing feet and the electricity bill she hadn't paid. She thought of how, moments earlier, she'd used her one tip of the night, a crumpled $5 bill, to buy a scratch-off ticket she knew she shouldn't have. It was a prayer in cardboard form, a fragile hope she'd dared to buy. As Samuel handed over his coins for a small coffee, their eyes met. Becky saw gratitude fighting with embarrassment, pride wrestling with need. Without letting herself second-guess, she reached into her apron and pulled out the scratch-off. Its rainbow sheen looked almost silly under the flickering fluorescence. She held it out to him. "Here," she said softly. "Maybe today's your lucky day." Samuel froze, eyes flicking between Becky and the ticket like she was offering him something forbidden. He shook his head, voice barely a whisper. "Miss, I can't take that. It's yours." Becky had already shoved the ticket into his hands. "It's yours now," she said, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. "Go on, scratch it." For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the flimsy card between Samuel's fingers. Outside, the parking lot stretched empty, just asphalt and the drone of cicadas. Inside, the air hung thick. He dug a quarter from his pocket and scraped. Becky leaned over the counter, her knuckles whitening on the laminate. First row, 2 lemons. A bust. Second row, a cherry, a star, another cherry. Nothing. Third row, Samuel's breath hitched. The quarter faltered. 3 stars. His head snapped up. The ticket trembled in his grip. "Becky," he rasped. "This says 25 grand. The words hung in the air like they didn't belong. Becky's pulse roared in her ears. 25,000. More money than she'd seen in years. Enough to clear her debts, fix the leaky roof, maybe even start fresh somewhere better for Danny. Her knees felt weak, and for a terrifying moment, she wondered if she'd made a horrible mistake. But then she looked at Samuel, who had lowered the ticket like it was an ancient relic, his hands trembling as tears gathered at the corners of his eyes. His lips moved silently, as if searching for words that had been lost long ago. Becky's heart clenched. "It's yours," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "You scratched it. You won." He tried to protest, voice breaking. "I can't. It's yours. You bought it." Becky stepped around the counter and gently placed her hand on his. His skin was cold, paper thin. "No, sir," she said firmly. "I bought hope, but you need it more. That's what matters." For a moment, neither moved. The buzzing light above them felt like it was the only sound in the world. Samuel let out a shuddering breath, a tear slipping down his lined cheek. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Say you'll take it," Becky replied. "Say you'll let yourself believe good things can still happen." He looked at her as though seeing a miracle in the form of a tired cashier. Slowly, he nodded, clutching the ticket like a lifeline. As Samuel walked out, coffee in one hand, ticket in the other, the automatic doors parted with a hiss that sounded almost reverent. Becky watched him disappear into the dark, heart pounding, a swirl of fear and strange joy twisting inside her. She didn't know how she'd cover rent now, or what she'd tell Danny in the morning. But as the taillights of an old pickup faded into the night, she felt lighter than she had in years. Somewhere in the distance, a lone truck rumbled down Route 40, its headlights sweeping across the empty lot like a silent promise that the story of a small act of kindness was only beginning. The desert sun crept over Route 40, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt and lighting up the faded paint on Marlene's stop and go. Inside, Becky wiped down the counter, eyelids heavy from another sleepless morning. The events of the night replayed in her mind, the veteran's trembling hands, the way the ticket seemed to glow under the flickering lights, the moment she let go of what could have been salvation for herself and Danny. She shook the thought away. It wasn't about her anymore. What Becky didn't know was that the small moment she'd shared with Samuel hadn't gone unnoticed. A trucker named Red Davis, who'd been parked at the far end of the lot that night, had watched the entire exchange from his cab. Moved beyond words, Red snapped a photo of Samuel walking into the night, ticket clutched in hand, and posted it to a trucker forum with a simple caption. This cashier just gave her scratch-off to a broke vet. Made him a winner. The world needs more like her. By midday, that post had traveled faster than any convoy. It bounced through CB chatter, truck stop diners, and private social media groups where drivers shared road warnings and stories of good folks along the way. Becky's name became synonymous with kindness, even as she remained unaware of the storm quietly building beyond the store's worn walls. The first clue came when a pair of truckers rolled in mid-afternoon, grimy from the road and quiet at first. One of them, a stocky man with grease-streaked hands, dropped a 20 into Becky's tip jar as he paid for coffee and a sandwich. "No change," he muttered. Before Becky could respond, his friend did the same, except he left a 50. The men nodded respectfully and left without another word. Continued like that throughout the day. Crumpled bills, a few coins, and the occasional handwritten note left on napkins or receipts. For respecting a man who served. Keep being the good. Truckers don't forget. Becky felt overwhelmed. She tried to refuse at first, but the drivers wouldn't hear of it. Each one had the same look in their eyes, a mixture of gratitude and quiet pride. By the end of her shift, her tip jar overflowed, and she had to tuck the excess into an old coffee tin beneath the register. Meanwhile, Samuel sat alone in a small, dingy motel room on the edge of town. The carpet smelled of mildew, and the curtains were stained with years of desert dust. He'd handed the motel clerk 2 crumpled 20s from his winnings and had barely looked at the room before locking the door behind him. Now, sitting on the edge of the bed, the ticket lying face up on the cracked nightstand, Samuel stared at a battered flip phone in his hands. His thumb hovered over the call button. The screen glowed with a number he hadn't dialed in nearly a decade. Carol. His daughter's name felt foreign on his lips, but the ache in his chest was as familiar as breathing. His mind raced back to long-ago arguments, slammed doors, and the day she'd stopped answering his letters. He'd let pride build walls he didn't know how to tear down. Gathering what little courage he had left, Samuel pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her voice, soft, older than he remembered, but unmistakably Carol. "Hello." Samuel froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His throat burned, his heart pounding loud enough to drown out reason. After a moment, he hung up, his hand trembling as he snapped the phone shut. He sat there, staring at the wall, guilt weighing heavier than the years themselves. Back at Marlene's, Becky's day grew stranger. Her manager, Troy, showed up mid-shift, his tie askew and a glint in his eye that Becky had come to dread. "Bex," he greeted too loudly. "You're famous." The phone's been ringing off the hook. Truckers, reporters, even some radio station asking for an interview. This is gold. We gotta lean into this. She wiped her hands on her apron, already bracing for what came next. "I'm talking t-shirts," Troy continued. "Becky's lucky stop. Maybe even a promo, buy a scratcher, get a free coffee. We could have a photo op. You and the vet. Get him back in here. People love that hero stuff. Becky's stomach turned. The idea of turning Samuel's quiet pain and her own moment of decency into some cheap stunt felt wrong on every level. No, she said firmly. That's not what this is about, Troy. He frowned, taken aback. Come on, Bex. You need the money. Danny? I know what Danny needs, she snapped, then softened. And I need to be able to look him in the eye. No stunts. No t-shirts. Let it be what it was. A good thing that didn't ask for anything back. Troy grumbled but backed off, muttering something about wasted opportunities as he left. That night, the lot outside the store filled with the soft glow of truck headlights. Convoys paused at Marlene's stop and go, drivers filing in one by one, each leaving something small. Cash, a kind word, a nod of respect. Becky's heart swelled and ached all at once. She didn't want to be anyone's symbol. She just wanted to do right. Far down the highway, Samuel lay awake on the lumpy motel bed, the winning ticket on the nightstand and the unopened flip phone beside it. Sleep wouldn't come. Guilt and hope warred inside him, as the hum of a passing truck echoed in the distance. A reminder that maybe redemption could still be found on the road ahead. A cold dawn broke over the truck stop, but the hum of engines never stopped. Becky wiped sleep from her eyes as the first convoy of the day rolled through Marlene's stop and go, headlights piercing the early mist. She wasn't ready for what came next. A line of truckers snaking out the door, each waiting to shake her hand or drop a folded bill into her overflowing tip jar. Some left notes, others simply nodded with quiet respect. What Becky didn't know was that a trucker known online as Big Joe from Tulsa had edited Red Davis's photo into a 2-minute video for his regional YouTube channel, Rolling with the Road Kings. His gravelly voice narrated Becky's simple act of generosity over shots of endless highways and American flags whipping in the wind. By the time Becky poured her first cup of coffee that morning, the video had already racked up thousands of views. A cascade of kindness followed. Truckers rerouted hundreds of miles to swing by the dusty store, some coming from as far away as Oregon or Montana. They parked in long rows along the gravel lot, their cabs gleaming in the rising sun. Inside the store, Becky's tip jar had grown so heavy she replaced it with a plastic storage bin. Drivers brought flowers, groceries, and envelopes stuffed with crumpled bills, insisting she deserved it for proving that good people still existed. At school, Becky's son Danny felt the shift before he even stepped off the bus. For years, his classmates teased him about his thrift store jackets and scuffed sneakers. But that morning, they surrounded him not with insults, but with curious questions and wide-eyed wonder. "Your mom's the lady from the video?" one girl asked. "My dad showed me on his phone," another boy added. "Said she's a hero." Danny's cheeks burned with a mix of pride and disbelief. He never thought his mom, who skipped dinner so he'd have enough, could be someone people looked up to. As the day wore on, teachers pulled him aside, offering gentle smiles and asking if he needed anything. He started to feel, for the first time, like his family wasn't invisible. Meanwhile, in the dim light of a cheap motel room, Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, a knock at the door freezing him mid-sip of stale coffee. He approached warily, heart pounding. On the other side stood Carol, his daughter, eyes red from a long overnight drive, her face a reflection of exhaustion and fear. "Dad?" she whispered, voice cracking as years of silence splintered between them. "Carol," he croaked. His hand trembled as he reached for her. For a moment, they hovered, then fell into a desperate embrace. Tears soaked Samuel's collar as Carol buried her face against his shoulder, sobs breaking free from years of regret. He held her as if afraid she'd vanish. What Samuel didn't know was that after he hung up, his story, already spreading among truckers, reached one driver who'd seen Samuel checking into the motel earlier that night. The driver, recognizing the face from the viral posts, found a number online connected to Carol's old outreach efforts for homeless veterans and called her with the tip. When she heard where he was, Carol raced through the night, desperate to reach the father she thought she'd lost forever. The two sat on the sagging motel bed for hours, words spilling out between them. Carol spoke of years spent wondering if he cared, of birthdays missed and letters unanswered. Samuel explained his shame, his fear that he wasn't worthy of forgiveness, his spiral after losing his wife and being swallowed by old war wounds. Their pain collided in raw honesty, but with each confession, they carved out space for healing. By the time afternoon sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, the bitterness had begun to melt into something softer, a cautious hope. Back at the store, Becky faced a new storm. Her phone rang nonstop, but it wasn't all truckers or reporters. Two numbers kept flashing across the screen. Local payday lenders who'd sold her high-interest loans years ago, back when she was drowning in medical bills for Danny's asthma attacks. They demanded immediate repayment, threatening lawsuits and wage garnishments. She felt the walls closing in. Every tip, every act of generosity meant for good now felt like a target on her back. She'd done the right thing, so why did it feel like everything was falling apart? That night, Becky stayed late, restocking shelves and counting the day's unexpected tips, unable to bring herself to lock up. The lot outside was quiet, the last trucker long gone, and the bins of donations hidden beneath the counter. As she swept the floor, tears slipped down her cheeks. The weight of expectation, fear, and sudden fame pressed down on her shoulders. She longed for the simple exhaustion of a regular shift, for the night before the scratch-off changed everything. Then the bell above the door jingled softly. Becky looked up, heart-stopping. There, in the doorway, stood Samuel, freshly showered, wearing a clean flannel shirt and jeans that actually fit. Beside him, Carol held his hand, her eyes warm and tired. "Mind if we come in?" Samuel asked softly. Becky blinked away tears. "Of course," she said, voice shaking. The three stood together in the middle of Marlene's stop and go, the smell of old coffee and fried food filling the quiet. The three lives intertwined by a single moment of kindness. After their quiet visit to Marlene's that night, Samuel and Carol spent the next few days focused on building something new. Carol helped Samuel get his paperwork in order to claim his winnings officially, and with part of the money, they secured him a small, clean apartment not far from town. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, quiet, and came with neighbors who looked out for each other. The kind of stability Samuel hadn't known in years. He started waking up with a purpose, meeting Carol for coffee or attending counseling sessions together. They both knew the road ahead would take work, but at least they were finally walking it side by side. Meanwhile, Marlene's stop and go became more than just a trucker's pit stop. In the mornings, Becky found herself stepping into a store that felt different. Drivers who once barely glanced her way now greeted her by name, and regulars swapped stories of kindness they'd witnessed elsewhere, inspired by what happened there. The tip jar was still full most days, but Becky no longer saw it as charity. She saw it as an investment from people who believed in her, and she began using it carefully to pay down debts and keep Danny's needs covered without sinking into another cycle of loans. Danny, who once dreaded each school morning, now walked the halls with quiet confidence. His classmates' whispers had turned from taunts to awe, and while Becky reminded him to stay humble, she couldn't hide her pride when he started coming home with stories of kids sticking up for each other instead of tearing each other down. The change in him felt like the best reward of all. Troy, seeing the steady stream of customers and realizing Becky's firm refusal to exploit the story hadn't hurt business at all, began to reevaluate his approach. He noticed how truckers came back not because of gimmicks, but because of the atmosphere. A place where respect and decency were served alongside coffee and sandwiches. Slowly, he shifted his tone. Instead of pushing t-shirts or cheap promotions, he started asking Becky's advice on stocking items truckers actually needed, and he kept the place clean, making the store a welcoming stop on Route 40. Local news stories eventually moved on, but a network of drivers kept the legend alive. They shared Becky's story over CB radios, in truck stop diners, and through online forums. Marlene's stop and go became a quiet landmark, not a tourist attraction with banners or photo ops, but a place where, if you needed a reminder of what generosity looked like, you'd find it. Some nights, Becky would stand at the front window during her shift, watching headlights glide past in the dark, knowing that out there were people who'd heard what happened and decided to carry that kindness further down the road. Becky never pretended everything was perfect. The bills still came, the shifts were still long, and some nights the weight of responsibility felt heavier than she could bear. But she didn't feel alone anymore. The calls from payday lenders lost their threat after word spread among the truckers, who organized to help her get legal assistance. Within weeks, the worst of her debts were renegotiated or paid off entirely, not by a single benefactor, but by dozens of small contributions from people who had been touched by her story. She never asked for this spotlight, and she never sought to keep it. Yet each time someone new walked in, she offered the same smile, the same simple service, and a sense that maybe the world wasn't as cold and unforgiving as it often felt. As summer settled over the desert and the days grew longer, Becky found herself with a little more time and money than she'd known in years. She began fixing up the small apartment she and Danny called home, replacing broken appliances, buying secondhand furniture, and even hanging a few bright posters on Danny's bedroom walls. Each change felt like laying another brick in the foundation of a future she'd once thought impossible. At the store, Becky started organizing simple events. A monthly trucker's breakfast where drivers could share coffee and conversation, a shelf with donated books for long-haul nights, even a donation jar for other local families in need. Troy, surprised at the loyalty these gestures inspired, backed her efforts wholeheartedly. He stopped seeing Becky as just an employee and started respecting her as the heart of the place. Samuel and Carol visited Marlene's regularly, sometimes bringing groceries or just stopping by to say hello. Samuel always insisted on paying for his coffee, slipping Becky a few extra dollars no matter how she protested. He found work driving a parts delivery truck for a local mechanic, and each week he grew a little stronger, a little more at ease in his new life. In the evenings, Becky would sit outside the store on a plastic chair, Danny curled up next to her, watching rigs roll by under the stars. The neon open 24 hours sign still flickered, but to Becky, it felt like a beacon, not of desperation, but of possibility. She knew the road ahead would have potholes and sharp turns, but she felt ready for them. In the end, Marlene's Stop and Go didn't become famous for a single act of kindness. It became known for what that kindness started. A ripple that spread along highways, into diners, schools, and quiet homes, proving that when you give without expecting anything in return, you might just find yourself surrounded by people who refuse to let you fall. This story reminds us how a single act of kindness can change countless lives, and that heroes walk among us every day. What would you have done if you were Becky or Samuel? Share your thoughts below, and if this inspired you, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more powerful stories like this. See you in the next video.